What is up? What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. Welcome into a special edition of the Seattle Mariners postgame recap. I've got MarinersSUR joining me here today for our weekly recap. Plus, we'll definitely break down a very frustrating loss for the Seattle Mariners. Before I do go into the game, I want to thank everybody. First and foremost, I've passed 4,000 subscribers last night. Thank you all so much for all the support. It certainly made a tough Mariners loss a lot better for me. So thank you to everybody that's been subbed, that decide to sub. I truly, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate it. If you're new here or lurking, go ahead and hit subscribe, hit that like button on the video, and then comment your thoughts down below as always. Also, make sure if you're on Twitter X to give MarinersSUR a follow, one of the best Mariner accounts on Twitter, hands down. His information will be linked in the description down below. Mariners lose today 2-1 to the Tigers. I mean, I could literally just have reposted my video last night and subbed in the name Bryce Miller for Brian Wu, dubbed it in. I'm just kind of beat up from this team right now, so I'm going to let MarinersSUR take the stage here. What were your thoughts on the game today?
Yeah, I mean, super frustrating. Nothing that I don't think nobody else is feeling, but you get, one hit in a game where Kenta Maeda is the bulk pitcher for the Tigers, and he's been nothing short of awful this year. The guy that opens a game, Alex Faedo, walks 4 guys. That's how you get your 1 run. They go to Shelby Miller for 4 outs, who's been awful this year with like a mid-5 ERA. And so, the pitching you're facing is atrocious, and you get 1 hit and your 1 run scored on 4 walks. And so it's more of the same from what we've seen from this team when they lose games. They go 0 for 8 with runners in scoring position on the hills of 2 of 12 last night. So, they had chances. I think a good microcosm of the game, I think, was in the 4th inning. We had, the Robles double. He steals 3rd and Arozarena's up to bat. First pitch of the game, or at bat, he looks at 92 right down the middle. Next pitch, he chases a splitter that's down and out, and he pops up a shallow pop fly to center field. And so it's like, all right, you look at the pitch you should do damage on, and you chase the one that the pitcher wants you to. And so there's just tons of at bats like that. And then after that, then Raleigh hits a line drive to the first baseman. So it just bad approach and then some bad luck mixed in. But I mean, I know they've been struggling, but I not in my wildest dreams that I think they were going to get 1 hit today with the lineup of pitching that the Tigers were going to throw at them. So I think one of the worst losses in the year, just when you look at kind of where we're at in the season, how well we pitched and who we were facing. So I don't know what's going on with them. It seems to me like these guys are kind of in their head a little bit. You can kind of just feel it when they're at the plate. They're pressing, and I'm kind of confused as to how we go from the highs of Sunday to the lows of here. I really thought that Sunday could have been a turning point of the season with Sunday Night Baseball, sweep of the Mets, Julio back. So to go to Detroit and drop 3 games and, you get blown out in 1 and the other 2 are just complete daggers. Frustrating for sure. So don't really have much more to add beyond that.
Yeah, I think you can just say frustrating. We've summed it up perfectly. I didn't get a chance to watch the game. I was at work listening to it. I didn't even realize they only had 1 hit, to be perfectly honest. I didn't even realize it was that bad. Kind of in and out listening to the game. And I didn't see that at bat. I wasn't even listening during that point, but I think that does sum it up perfectly. That's been the Mariners this year. Either trying to do too much, or you're talking about the Rosarina at bat, or trying to, like you said, watching a fastball center cut down the middle and not being aggressive on it. Or when they are aggressive, they're popping up aggressive pitches. And I know the strikeouts have been frustrating, but it's just the overall at bat quality has seemed really poor too. And like you said, just not good pitching. Tuesday, fine. Turek Skubal shuts you down. I can live with that. I mean, it'd be nice to get him once maybe. And to your point too, I've talked about it on my show all the time. This team just is so quick at killing their good vibes. They win the Phillies series. Yeah, the Wheeler game was frustrating, but still a great series win. Detroit comes into town, undoes the vibes. The Mets series, like I said, outside of maybe that Rangers series, probably the high point of the season, and just gone. I mean, we were so excited Sunday night. I mean, it could not be more erased for me from those vibes. I'm just like, I'm almost like the breaking point with this team.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's just, and I thought maybe going into Detroit, they got you last week. I thought, okay, you make some adjustments, Skubal, whatever, he's just good. But like Brian Salmons last night, where are the adjustments after he shut you down last week? Nothing. Same awful at bats all the way across the board. And one thing I know you've brought up, and I'll let you speak to it here: 1-11 or 1-12 against Detroit and Anaheim in their last 13 games against those teams. And they're not White Sox level bad, but if you want to be a championship contender, I mean, at least go 5-8 in those games, right?
For sure. Yeah, it's mind boggling. And like the Salmons, I looked because I was just kind of curious on, like, all right, this guy shut us down twice. He's a 29-year-old lefty making his MLB debut this year. So, and he, 99, he's a classic kind of AAA guy that teams that are out are going to call up to eat up innings. And yeah, like you said, he gets you last week, whatever, you haven't seen him before. He kind of just throws a lot of off speed, but how do you let him do that for a second time the next week? It's unbelievable for, I think, a team like the Mariners, who has, I think, talent in the lineup, to get shut down by him 2 outings in a row. It's inexcusable. And yeah, like you said, we're 1-11 against the Angels and White Sox in our last 12. So close to dropping 12 in a row to them. We had that Haniger walk-off that they very well could have made a diving catch on. And I made a point that if you even go 4-8 in those 12, and I think the White Sox would do that, you'd be tied with the Astros for the division and KC for wild card 3. Just the bare minimum of what you'd expect. And if you go 8-4, like I think you would expect, maybe, you're sitting 3.5 up right now. And I just don't get it, because we went set in that same kind of stretch. You're 7-1 against the Padres, Phillies, and Mets. And then 5 of those you won by 4 more runs. So here you are pummeling good baseball teams, and against these mediocre teams, you can't even get a win a third of the time, just to even be, tied with the Astros, which is where you'd be. So I don't know what's going on. Are they just not focused for him? I think Raleigh made comment like, we just need to have the same energy no matter the opponent, which, is inexcusable if that's the case. But, and it's been kind of the same game, right? We don't score against mediocre pitching. There's 1 inning mixed in there. We have no margin of error. They find a way to hit a big home run. They, bloop you to death, whatever. Maybe you just don't have a margin of error. So that 1 inning kills you. And so I don't know the answer, but, very frustrating to have those two teams be what at this point looks like what's going to kind of put the nail in the coffin for the season, unless they, find a way to snap out of this. But, this bad stretch of baseball has been going on for a while. The bad hitting's been really season long. And so it's just kind of, like I said, unfathomable to me that they've struggled this bad against those two teams.
Yeah, it's funny because last year I think was like the polar opposite. They beat all the bad teams and they couldn't break even with the good ones. Now they've broken even with the good teams, so they can't beat the bad teams. It was just so frustrating. And to your point, I think, and I know we've kind of laughed about it, DMing back and forth about, the Tigers and Angels BABIPing this team to death, which has been true in some regards. But like you said, when you don't put up the runs, you leave yourself that inning where a couple bloops fall in. And today wasn't necessarily a couple bloops. We'll talk about that 8th inning here in a minute, but you're susceptible to that. That shouldn't be what kills you. The Tigers getting a 2-run inning off some BABIP hits, or the Angels doing the same thing, shouldn't be the end of the game. No. I've talked about it before. Some of these starts that the Mariners starting pitchers have had, they just lost back-to-back games where we should have been talking about how great Brian Wu and Bryce Miller have been. I thought for sure we might see those guys slowing down a bit towards the end of the year. They've been fantastic. There's no reason. It's back-to-back 7 shutout innings for these guys. And I feel like last night I'm sitting there talking, like, I didn't even mention how good Brian Wu was. We didn't even talk about how great Bryce Miller was tonight. It's a shame.
Yeah, I feel bad for the pitching because, like you said, they're not getting their due because all the attention's on the anemic offense. So yeah, I feel bad because those two have been incredible really all season long, and especially the last 2 games, they did everything they could have and more. So definitely credit where it's due to both of them because they were fantastic.
Yeah, none of the frustrations that we have are towards Brian Wu or Bryce Miller, for truthfully any of the starting pitchers. George Kirby had a bad game. I think he'll be fine. Logan's great. Castillo's great. It's everything else. I do want to talk about the 8th inning a little bit. Super frustrating. I know there's been some criticisms of how Scott handled the 8th inning and stuff like that. What were your thoughts on it? Again, I think a lot of it at the end of the day goes back to the offense, but what were your kind of thoughts on that 8th inning where Javi Baez, of all people?
Yeah, unbelievable. And that's the other thing. I feel like he's been kind of a thorn in our side in the 2 series. I don't know what his numbers are, but it feels like he's had a few walks, a few hits. And this is a guy, when I watch Tigers games, he's so easy for other teams to get out, and it's backed up by the numbers that he's posted. And so I don't know what it is. I don't have a problem from going to Munoz. I think whenever you can hand the ball to Munoz with the lead with 4 outs to go, 5 outs to go, it's not a bad idea. But at the same time, Jimmy Garcia walked the first guy, but then the next 2 he got out easily. I think his last pitch to the last hitter was like, 98.7 mile an hour fastball. So in my mind, it's like, I know he's had a few hiccups in Seattle, but he's been a great pitcher all year. I don't think I would have minded leaving him in for Baez, to be honest. He's already warmed up. He's kind of got his pitches dialed in. And you do run that risk when you bring a new pitcher in, that sometimes it takes him a hitter or two to kind of find their pitches. And so in my mind, and Munoz did throw last night, so I don't know about going to him for a 4-out save. So if it were me, I probably would have left Jimmy Garcia in, and it's easier to say now. But at the same time, I'm not going to poke Scott too hard for going to Munoz there. But I also, like I said, I think I probably left Garcia in, and obviously it didn't work out. And I think that's been the other issue with Scott this year is, right or wrong, he just can't seem to push the right button. Whatever he does, it seems to be the wrong decision. So yeah, that's kind of all I have there.
Yeah, and I'm with you. Like, I'm not going to complain that he went to Andres Munoz in that situation. I totally get it. If I'm trying to put myself in that situation, how would I have handled that? I maybe send Bryce Miller out there for the 8th. He was at 91 pitches. I do get it. And you've got really good relievers, but Garcia threw a lot yesterday. Munoz threw yesterday. Listen, the bottom line, I think that the main issue is 1 run isn't going to cut it.
Yes.
I think that's what I keep going back to. But you made a great point. And you said it on Twitter too. Regardless of what you think of Scott's decision-making, right or wrong, the right buttons have not been pushed. Now he's been fine. Like when they're up 3-0 and Garcia has a 1-2-3, then they go to Munoz 1-2-3, fine. But any like 50-50 where it's like, ooh, what do you do here? He's been wrong. And I'm not even saying like logically wrong. I don't think some of the decisions have been awful. I honestly didn't have a huge problem with today in the grand scheme of things. But for whatever reason, I go back to what I've been saying. People that have watched my videos have heard this, like the results-based analysis a little bit. It's just not working. Every toss-up call Scott seems to make just does not work, whether it's pinch hitting or whether it's bullpen management. I don't know what the right answers are, but it's not working. It seems like, at least.
Yeah, completely agree. Like you said, I think logically a lot of the decisions have made sense, but he's had more this year, I think, than in the past, where like I go back to the Devers decision to pitch to him in Boston, where I'm like, what are you doing? That run does not matter. And why are you throwing to him? So there's been a few of those as well where it doesn't make sense. And yeah, I mean, we've lost a ton of 1-run games. At least I haven't looked at what the numbers are, but and that I think kind of a lot of those do go back to manager decisions. But like you said, it ultimately comes back to the hitting, and that shouldn't even been a discussion today. Against Maeda, you should have 3-4 runs easy, and that should be a game in the last 6 outs. You can kind of coast through a little bit and, maybe go Chargois and Snyder or whatever it may be. So yeah, it comes back down to the hitting, not giving any margin for error. But I think Scott has to wear it a little bit too, because nothing's working out that he's doing.
Yeah, exactly. And listen, we talked about this before we came on. The players deserve a lot of blame for this too. I mean, that slider Munoz and I'm not going to rip Andres Munoz. Dude hasn't given up a hit in like a month. So this is not what I'm trying to do here, but that slider was a cement mixer right down the middle, and listen, Baez is not good. I remember a couple of years ago, Seawald struck him out on a pitch. I can't understand why he even swung at it. It would have killed a left-handed. It would have been behind a left-handed hitter, and the dude swung at it. But the one thing he does have is power, and if you throw a cement mixer over the middle of the plate, he'll hit it out. But what's your thoughts on it? Because we talked. Listen, I've kind of been at my breaking point with Scott a little bit. I think it's, unless they go on some major run here, win a World Series or make a deep playoff run, I think it's time for a new voice in the dugout. I've been pretty clear on that. It's not a personal thing. I don't have any ill will towards Scott or anything like that. But the players have to own some of this too, don't they?
Oh, 100%. And I go back to even, last year, they had a lead in the division in August. At that point, a good amount of the season is behind you with the players that you have and, the Rangers and Astros have. And so, I mean, how much of that blame can you put on 1 month of the season, on the manager and front office if at that point the team they had out there was good enough to be in first place. And obviously they did some things they could have done better, but to me, a lot of that goes to the players for not kind of continuing what they had done to that point. In terms of this year, I was on a podcast with Jake, Raise a Trident, and Trevor from Mariners
Soto Mojo.
Soto Mojo.
Yep.
And his point was like, they're not asking the players to do anything they haven't before. These guys have been good major league players, and a lot of them were last year. All we're asking them to do is go do what they've done up to this point in their career, even 80% of it. And if they were doing that, we would not be having this conversation right now. And so it's not like we have this group of players that we're asking, hey, we want you to have career years. That's not it at all. And so the fact that, hardly any player, if any, are even playing to their career averages, I think that's on the players. At the same token, though, is that somewhat on the coaching staff because everybody's struggling? I don't know. But yeah, I definitely put a lot of blame on the players. And I think if you were to ask them to, I think they would as well. I think all of them would realize they're not having good years. And that's on them, right? To not kind of perform to what their expectations are and what they are asked to do. That squarely kind of falls on them. So a lot of blame to go around. And I think that you kind of made a good point before he came on. I think people want to blame one person a lot of the time, and that's manager, GM, ownership, which is fair. They all have their share of blame. It's hard to blame just one player, but it's been kind of a collective failure within the lineup on performing to their ability. And then even in the bullpen, Munoz, Jimmy Garcia, a lot of them are having like good years. Austin both, if you look at their ERA, but just in critical moments, they've been having letdowns in the most inopportune times. And that's on them as well.
Yeah, well said. And that's, I think, one of the biggest things is that I think everyone kind of looks for, I don't want to call it a boogeyman, but there's got to be one person just to blame. And that's where kind of some of my defense of Scott comes in. It's not that I'm enamored with him or anything. If they fired him tomorrow, I probably wouldn't lose a wink of sleep over it. But I just don't think that it's one small thing of, oh, he's gone, someone else is in, this team is fixed. I think there's some deeper issues. I made some jokes after they fired Brant Brown because they tore up the Angels and, that was the fix. Brant Brown was the problem. But listen, of course, what a shock. Brant Brown was not just the one singular problem with this team. Everybody deserves blame. It starts at the top. Ownership deserves a lot of blame. We've talked about that a lot. We'll get into it. Jerry and Justin deserve blame. It just, regardless of what we think of the process, the results aren't there. Scott and the coaching staff deserve blame. They're ultimately responsible. And the players do as well at their level. They've got to perform. Like you said, it's a cliche, but if these guys were just playing to the back of their baseball cards, I think this team is a 4-5 game lead in this division right now, honestly. Yeah. Not asking for much. Career averages. Not even, like you said, an exceptional season, just not your worst season ever. Right. But to your point, it's like, and this is where I just don't know. Maybe that does go back to the coaching staff. Maybe there's something they're just not getting out of these guys, and that there is something inside of them. It seems weird to me that like Jorge Polanco, Mitch Garver would come over and Scott would be so bad, or the hitting coach is so bad that they zapped all their, I can understand with guys coming up more so with development, that maybe being an issue, but with veterans, I kind of feel like, and I know I've repeated myself and I think I've said this to you 20 times now, they had Garver sign the dotted line and said, just do what you do. Like, we don't need you to change anything. So I really don't know, but what's kind of your take? We'll get into a little bit. Ownership, front office, where are you at right now? I know we've talked about it before, but it feels like kind of a hot topic right now in Mariners world.
Yeah, I'll kind of start at the top. So like with ownership, obviously there's nothing any of us can do. If Stanton wants to own the team, he's going to own the team. But I think he deserves a lot of the blame, right? I think ran payrolls that are embarrassing for like the market that Seattle is. And I think I mentioned this before. I think part of the issue too is that he's jacked the payroll around it. From what I've read, he's told Jerry and Justin they're going to have one payroll in future seasons, and then it's something else. And that's hard to plan a team for when that's the case. And that causes an off season of what you just saw, where they had to, trade some players to package salaries away. And so Stanton either needs to increase payroll or he needs to be consistent with what is promised. And so when they're doing a 3-5 year plan, they can execute on it. So like I said, it's embarrassing with the payroll he's putting out in Seattle. If that's what he wants to do, I think he needs to sell the team to somebody that can run a payroll commensurate to the market and like what the fans deserve. Because I mean, you look at the stadium, it's a lot of times it's full, right? Even on weekday games this year. With the GM, kind of like we just said with Scott, like whatever button he's pushing isn't working. I think that kind of goes for Justin and Jerry a little bit, especially in this past offseason. I think logically a lot of the moves made sense, but for whatever reason, they haven't worked out. And so if we miss the playoffs for a second time in a row with this pitching staff, I think, a change would be warranted. Going back to the top, though, I don't know that I trust John Stanton to do better. I think, with Jerry, they've done it with their draft development pitching ability. They've built this kind of really nice floor for the organization to where a bad season is like what we're looking at this year. But at the same time, you do have this really great farm system and pitching staff. And so if you could bring somebody in that can maybe do better at hitting identification, you have a playoff team. So I think a change could be warranted. And then if they don't, I think, yeah, like you said, if we miss the playoffs, I think definitely a manager change. Scott's been here a long time, and maybe it is just a new voice is needed. Then in terms of player, easiest fix would be to increase payroll, bring in a couple guys. But ultimately it's going to come down to guys like JP, Cal, Julio performing, much closer to expectations next year. So hopefully they go on a run these last 40 games and everybody's back next year. But if not, I think changes are definitely needed. And like ideally it'd be at the very, very top. That won't happen. So I think he's going to have to work downwards from there and make the changes.
Yeah, like you said, unfortunately, nothing we can do about Stan. I say the same thing in every video. Like, I'd love new ownership, but it's just not something that's really feasible unless John decides to sell the team or the ownership group decides to sell the team. And yeah, to be clear, like, listen, I want this team to go on a run and get in this thing and make a run. I hate doing these after. I still enjoy doing these recaps, but I want to talk about wins, man. I want to talk about Bryce Miller and Brian Woo's dominance the last two nights and the Mariners getting a big series win. And I think you're the same way. We're pretty optimistic by nature. We were two of the more optimistic people about this team coming into this year. So I still hold out hope that they can make a run and do something in here. I really do. It's just running out of time. And it's tough after that Tiger series to have a lot of optimism. And yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I'm kind of in the same boat with Jerry and Justin as well. I think they've done a lot of good here. I don't have like negative feelings towards them necessarily, but and you said it, and I think you even said it on the podcast with Jake and Soto Mojo, they've done a real nice job with that floor. They have a solid base there, but it may just need someone else to get it over the top. I don't know. I could be dead wrong on that. I'm with you. I don't trust Stanton either to make the right hire, but I also can't just go, well, John can't do better, so we just got to keep the status quo either. It's such a tough balance. And I could certainly understand. I'd be willing to maybe, depending on how this season finishes up, go new manager, see if that maybe changes something. I don't know. I have my doubts about how much that'll change. Like I said, get some bounce back years from these guys, but I'd also certainly understand if they decided to make a change at the front office and see if they can get someone that can take what I think is a good core. And like you said, maybe find someone from a more offensive oriented organization and with better scouting or understanding of offense and get the team over the top. I don't know what that answer is. I'm sure we'll both dig into that more, as we get to the off season if changes are made. But, it's tough right now because, we're trying to balance, and this is just for anybody listening, like the team is still in contention. I know some people are like, no, they're done, but they are still there. And we're also trying to discuss what moves they make in the off season. It's so frustrating right now. Pittsburgh tomorrow, Paul Skeens. That's going to be fun. How you feeling about this next series in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, not great, but I mean, oddly enough, it's Brian Salmons and Kenta Maeda. I think it shut you down about as much as Paul Skeens could. And so,
what's Skeens going to do?
Yeah, so in a way, it's like you have to hope we let up 0 or 1 runs and scratch across a few, and that to me, like that's the equation I'm hoping for, no matter who's on the mound. So. I mean, I don't know with this team. Yeah, I certainly don't expect to win tomorrow, but maybe Logan goes 8 shutout and we find a way to get 1 or 2. And if you can do that, the pitching matchups are great in game 2 and 3. I almost hesitate to say that though, just because once again, it doesn't seem to matter right now. But yeah, Pirates have lost 10 in a row. And in terms of like what needs to happen, you have to go there and win a series and kind of get going back in the right direction. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen or I expect it, but I think that's what needs to happen. You go drop a series in Pittsburgh or get swept with the Astros playing the White Sox, you're going to be 5 or even 6 back, and the AL West is all but done. And then now you're hoping on like a Royals and Red Sox collapse. So yeah, hopefully they can go there and find a way to get 2 or 3, if not more. But I don't have high hopes for it. And that sounds weird saying when you're facing a team who's lost 10 in a row and are throwing like Bailey Falter and I think Jake Woodford against you. That should be a series where you're confident you'll get 2 or 3, especially running out Kirby, Castillo,
and Logan. You got your big 3.
Logan, Castillo, Kirby. You should feel like you're going to get 2 or 3, but with the offense, I can't confidently say that I feel that'll happen, but hopefully it will. If they can win tomorrow, they're in a great shape to get 2 out of 3. So we'll see what happens. They really need it.
Well, and then to your point too, Astros get the White Sox, then the Mariners, if they drop this series, then you go play the Dodgers.
Yeah.
So, and the Dodgers, of course, in time for the Mariners, are getting Mookie Betts back. I think Muncy or maybe it was someone else. Yeah, is coming. So, of course, never fails when the Mariners come into town, the teams get healthy. Yeah, I mean, I guess the positive to look at tomorrow is Paul Skeens can't do any more damage to us than Brian Sammons and Kenta Maeda did. You can't throw more than a shutout. So in some regards, in kind of a sick, twisted way, it's whatever. We've been shut out by the worst. So even if we claw 1 or 2 runs off Skeens, it's going to feel like a huge victory. I will say from just looking at it from a baseball perspective, tune in tomorrow night. What a great pitching matchup. Logan Gilbert against Paul Skeens is, I'm honestly, in a way, the series kind of broke me a little bit. I told you that in the DM on Twitter. I'm actually kind of looking forward to the game tomorrow. Talk about just baseball at its purest, in my opinion.
Agreed. It should be a great pitching match. But I was listening to 710 Seattle this afternoon, and I think they were saying that like Skeens' fastball, his last outing was like 3 miles an hour down from where he was his initial outing, and his velocity was kind of been trending down. So maybe he is running into a little bit of fatigue, but I'm sure he's licking his chops at facing the Mariners tomorrow. But yeah, I think you're right. I'm kind of the same way where just this season, I don't know if it's apathy is the right word, but maybe a little bit where I'm just kind of going to watch the games without many expectations and just enjoy it for what it is. And, 40 more baseball games. But yeah, it should be, like you said, it's almost easier for me when we face like a Skubal or Skeens, because if we get shut down, I'm not so pissed off about it because they shut down everybody. So it's a little bit easier for me to watch, to be honest.
Yeah, I will say be careful, because that was literally how after the Angels series, I did the same thing. Like, I'm just going to sit back and watch baseball. And then, of course, the team goes on a run and gets my hopes back up. So as soon as we're there, they're going to like somehow get 8 runs off Paul Skeens, and they're going to pull us right back in. Houston's going to get swept by Chicago. It's going to be, I'm not saying it's going to happen to anybody listening. It's just how it seems to go. But to your point, and maybe with the Pirates falling out of it, Skeens gets pulled after 5 innings. I can see that too.
Yeah.
So you might have a chance to get to him late. I always hate playing teams on massive losing streaks.
Yeah.
I mean, the White Sox are kind of an exception because they're so bad, but Pittsburgh's they're bad, but they're not awful. So you kind of figure they're not going to lose 13 in a row. So that makes me a little hesitant. But yeah, I would just, advise people to enjoy what should be a great pitching matchup tomorrow. And I think both of us will as well. Any closing thoughts? Anything else you want to talk about? I think we've kind of gone through everything, but is there anything else you had in your mind with this team?
Not really. I think, for kind of 120 games, it's been a lot of the same story where the offense has been letting down the pitching way too much. And, we've lost a massive lead. 3 games back in the division and wild card. Royals do have like a brutal schedule the rest of the way. I just don't think we can get much further back and have like realistic hopes for getting back into it. If we do, it's going to require like a 15-5 stretch. And this offense hasn't shown really any indication that they're able to pull it off. So, if they were to pull this off, I think they have to get through this road trip and kind of remain 3 games back, whether that's the wild card, division, both, whatever it is. I think that's kind of what they have to do. And so we'll see where they're at, 6 days from now. And I think that'll probably kind of inform just how I feel about their chances in the last 34. So hopefully they find a way, but not confident at all that they do. But weirder things have happened in baseball. So I'll tune in and see what unfolds.
Yeah, and listen, I think I think you'd agree with it too. Like, I just want to see them play better baseball.
Yeah.
If the Astros win, and like I've said that during my post games, the Astros won while the Mariners swept the Mets. Didn't bother me. Mariners were playing good ball. You keep playing good baseball, good things will happen. That's what's just so frustrating to me. It's not so much where they're at standings wise. I mean, it is after having a 10-game lead, certainly, but just seeing them play ugly baseball for 3 days is so frustrating. And I just want to see them play good ball. If they win tomorrow and Houston wins and Kansas City wins, so be it. It'll just be nice to watch this team play a full game and take care of business, so
Exactly.
even from that perspective, be nice. And last thing I'll say, and I know I said it last night, and you said it today on Twitter as well. There's certainly been way worse Mariners teams by far, but man, this has been like easily, I think, one of the most frustrating that I've sat through every game. It has been, and that's what being in contention will do sometimes, but it has been so frustrating with this team night in, night out.
Agreed. And one other thing I'll say too is
Yeah.
like going back to the trade deadline, I like the players they got, but I did feel at the time that they should have went a player or two further. And I feel even more strongly about that now on like two fronts. Like Rojas was struggling very, very much going into the deadline. And Demo, you knew JP Crawford was going to be hurt. So even like somebody like Ahmed Rosario, who was on the waiver wire, I still don't quite understand why they didn't plug one or both those holes. Because they've been, and I don't mean to blame those two for the failures of the team because it's not them. But I just think that more so is I think a failure on Jerry and Justin as to why didn't you just go get 1 to 2 more hitters that had a better chance of being like league average in the lineup at third and or short. So that's been kind of a frustrating point for me unfolding over the last couple weeks.
Yeah, no, for me too. And I like the deadline. I gave it an A-B+, but yeah, seems like maybe one piece missing. I'm with you. Like, and I get like Paredes might have been too expensive. I'm not, but like you said, Ahmed Rosario, Isaiah kind of Falefa. Would that have made the difference? I don't know, but you would have been probably in a better position. Another one I'll throw out there, not to go back to last night's game, but how nice would have, a prime Gabe Spire have been against Kerry Carpenter? You probably win that game. Carpenter is dreadful against left-handed pitching. Now, they may have pinch hit somebody, but great, fine. Pinch hit, I don't know who's on the Tigers bench that I'm missing. Baez was there. Fine. I'll rather take my chances Spire versus Baez than, someone else versus Carpenter, honestly. So a lefty reliever. You mentioned Andrew Chafin. I think that would have been a perfect addition. He's not great. Does he move the needle? Not really, but maybe you win that game last night and you're 2 back versus 3. It would feel a lot better. And I'm not going to blame Scott for not going to Saucedo in that spot. Sauce has been brutal. I've been calling for less Saucedo. I can't jump on Scott then for not using him. But yeah, like last year's Gabe Spire or someone like that, maybe you win that, or at least we could be more critical of Scott for sticking with Garcia then. I don't know. So
Agreed.
Well, that is going to wrap it up for us today. Thank you all for watching, listening. If you made it through this, like I said a few weeks ago, you're all pretty sick for still tuning in to Mariners coverage at this point, but I appreciate every single one of you. Channel members, I'm going to do a live stream Saturday morning for the game, so grab your cup of coffee. I think the Mariners play at 10 a.m., so we'll have a member stream. We'll do a little Q&A, hang out, watch the game together. Hopefully a Mariners W, so channel members get ready for that. I'll post some details. I'll have a contest giveaway as well, so I'll post that in the community tab. Thank you for joining me as always, my friend. I appreciate it. Always appreciate your insights. Again, everybody go follow MarinersSUR on Twitter X. Hit like, comment. Well, don't hit comment, but comment and hit subscribe on the channel. And we will see you guys all next week. Take care, everybody. Go Mariners.